not be the one waking up because I didn't hear a thing. But she went running to the window, and then she went to the back and she said, "They're stealing our grill."
Oh my God. Oh.
And by the time I kind of came stumbling out of bed, you know, there were these two gentlemen who had removed a pretty heavy barbecue grill out of the backyard and had loaded it into what I can only assume was their mother's minivan. And because I don't know because these guys look like they were sort of in this business. I don't know many people in this business that drive large white caravans, you know, just as a stock and trade. So, so we called the police. The police came. They didn't find anything. So then my wife and I decided to go looking, you know, investigative CSI style, driving around, and thought we spotted a van that might have matched the description. And then somebody started shouting at us, and we both decided that IHOP was probably the better place for us to be at that moment. So we decided to regroup over breakfast, and now all weekend long, I've heard every time my wife hears the sound, "Did you hear that? Did you hear that?" So I have got very little sleep, but there is a silver lining because I've been working on her for 2 years now to get a dog, because I really want a dog. And
I got one for you.
Oh, well, good.
Was the intent maybe to keep you off the grill?
Yeah, there you go. So turn down the heat, right? But there is a silver lining in that we're going to probably get a dog here because I've taken every opportunity this weekend to say, see, if we had a dog, we'd probably still have a grill. You know, but we'll see where that goes. So, you know, the reason I tell that story is, one, because it just happened, and it's sort of why I'm a little bit bleary-eyed. But two, I think that there's a silver lining to most, you know, most things. And, you know, we're obviously dealing with some challenges at Del Dot. But the good news is that we're kind of uncovering some of these mistakes that were made in the past. We're getting through them. And the good news is that, you know, I can't speak to the way things were done before, but with Nicole's help, you know, we're putting in the policies, procedures, and protocols so that we can't make those same mistakes, even if we wanted to. And so we're going to get there. I think that the staff is very anxious to kind of move past some of this gunk, and you know, so I'm confident. I'm confident that we'll get there. But you know, this year we did something a little bit different on the budget. The governor is very anxious for us to move past some of the challenging times that we've had at Del Dot. He also buys into this whole concept of transparency. You know, when I came to Del Dot, I talked about this whole team approach, which was, you know, we're all Del Dot. It's not just a real estate issue, a subdivision issue, a planning issue, or a finance issue. We're all one team. We rise as a team or we fall as a team. But team is also an acronym. It means that we'll be an agency that's more transparent, more efficient, more accountable, and we're going to measure our performance. So on the transparency side, we now list all of our real estate purchases online. So you can go to our website and see where Del Dot bought real estate in the previous month, and we put that up there. That's something that's never been done before. On the efficiency side, you know, I point to, you know, the Gannett newspaper chain, which the News Journal is a part of. They did a national story on the Recovery Act, or the stimulus, whichever way you want to look at it. And they highlighted projects across the country that had come in over time and over budget, because change orders are the absolute bane of every contract's existence. And a lot of projects across the country came in, you know, longer than what they were expecting and cost a little bit more. They actually highlighted the Easy Pass lanes on 95 as an example of a project that came in on time and under budget. You know, and that's Delaware, and I didn't have anything to do with that. So I think that the agency was headed in the right direction there. With Hurricane Irene, there was a road that was absolutely destroyed in Kent County, and our forces, I remember some of the residents telling me, because I was out there in the middle of it, like the ocean on either side, standing on the one patch of asphalt that was still there. And I remember some of the residents saying, well, it'll be weeks before we can get back in here. And our forces got that road open in 36 hours. And so, you know, that's very efficient. We're going to save $10 million this year by being more efficient with our finances. That's a big sum of money. That's a big dollar figure. On the accountability side, I think accountability means a lot of things, but part of it means for me and other staff coming to meetings like these and talking to the taxpayers and the residents and saying, you know, this is what we're doing, and not circling the wagons and trying to play defense a lot. And on the measuring performance, which is the last part, you know, performance management is not a new concept in excuse me, in the public sector. A lot of public agencies are now going to you know, to this management forum to both manage their agencies better and let the public know what they're doing. So I believe within the next month we're going to be launching a dashboard, so all of you can go to our website and you can see how we're doing in a variety of management measures. So that's the whole team concept. On the transparency side, the governor buys into it. So this year he made us part of the budget process. So normally it's just the governor and Ann Vasali out there talking about the budget, because DelDOT's kind of separate, right? There's the state budget, the general fund, and then DelDOT has the transportation trust fund by which we get all of our operating and capital, well, for the state capital program. We also get some federal money on top of that. So he decided that we would bring that out in the honor of transparency, and we had a very good conversation. We talked about the fact that you know, the Transportation Trust Fund Task Force report was one of the first documents that I was handed when I came on. It's a very valuable document, and if you read it, which I'm sure many of you have, you will learn that DelDOT has a large number of projects that we don't have the money to build. And that is a true fact. We have many more projects than we have money that we can build those projects. Now, that's not just a Delaware issue, that is true of most states or jurisdictions across the country. At the federal level, the American Council of Engineers you know, has estimated that there's a $3 trillion backlog. That's not just transportation, that's all infrastructure, sewers, you know, things like that. And so in Delaware, we have some challenges, but I also think that our transportation network is in very good shape. And I don't just say that qualitatively, quantitatively, if you look, 94% of our bridges, statewide, bridges are a big challenge for a lot of state DOTs. 94% of our bridges are rated fair or better. That compares with some states, including some of our neighbors, where 50% of their bridges are rated structurally deficient or functionally obsolete. Right, and bridges are very expensive. I look at I-95. I-95 is a 10-lane facility for most of its length through Delaware. Right? Even where 95 kind of narrows through Wilmington, we have 495 to provide a nice access around that a lot of trucks and other traffic take advantage of. If you go south to Virginia and you get below the Beltway, down below Richmond, I-95 is a 6-lane facility. And it breaks down every single day. Trucks go out of their way to avoid it. You can't get through that stretch on a regular basis. If you go north on I-95 to Rhode Island, Rhode Island has a bridge on I-95 that is posted at 18 tons, which means that the majority of trucks that come up and down I-95 actually have to get off of 95 and drive through a community and then get back on above or below the bridge. That's on I-95, and the reason that that bridge is rated at 18 tons is because they don't have the $200 million that would be required to replace it. Now in Delaware, we're actually blessed. We actually have revenue, right? We have revenue that comes in. We have revenue that comes in the form of a gas tax. We have the revenues that come in the form, you know, about a third of our revenue comes in from tolls, the majority of which come off of 95. Another third comes off of our, you know, some of the fees and stuff that we have out there. So you can go through and we bring in about $500 million a year. And we use that, for the most part, some on state-related projects. We also have to match 20% for the most part on our federal projects. So if you get $100 million in a project and you can use federal money, $80 million is federal, $20 million is state. But the upshot of it all is that right now, debt service is the largest percentage of our operating budget. So if you look at the entire pie that we are dealing with on our operating budget, 36% of it, or about $136 million, is going to debt service. That's a large number. Now, debt is not something that we should be scared of in transportation. It's what you do. You borrow money and you build projects. Well, in Delaware, we have borrowed money and we've built a lot of projects, and now we need to start to manage that debt a little bit more responsibly. And the governor is committed to doing that as well. So that's what we're going to be doing. Had we not saved the $10 million this year by not borrowing, I would be saying that our debt service is at 40%. But our debt is also structured very well. A lot of states are in a position right now where they're almost like in a jumbo mortgage situation, you know, where when they pay $1 of debt service, it goes only for interest, right? In Delaware, our debt is actually structured very well. So when we pay $1 of debt service, 60 cents goes to principal reduction, 40 cents goes to interest. So the good news is that we can actually build our way out of this ourselves if we can manage our debt responsibly. So that's why this year we worked with the governor to come up with a budget that we feel is robust in that it gets us projects all across the state, but is responsible in that it helps us reduce our debt, which is $1.2 billion. We're going to be at $1.1 billion this year, and I'd like to see in a couple of years us get that figure under $1 billion.
That's transportation debt.
Transportation debt, yes, 1.2 right now. We'll be at 1.1 because we're going to pay off a bunch of it, because we're also refinancing. It's a very good time to borrow money right now or to refinance. And so that's what we're doing because we have that flexibility. We're refinancing. So I actually can see us in a couple of years being under $1 billion in debt. We still have the highest possible credit rating that a transportation agency can have. I want to say it's AA. Some of the different agencies do it a little bit differently. But we are rated very highly by the bond rating agencies. So we're just taking some proactive steps to keep us in that position so that, you know, in the future we free up some flexibility and you know, we continue to maintain our networks. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be bringing in more of an asset management mindset when it comes to the transportation network. So we know that our bridges and our pavements are in good shape. And so to me, the responsible way to run a state DOT in this era of constrained resources is that you have to figure, okay, what is the dollar figure I need to maintain my bridges, my pavements, my fleets, like all of our trucks, and our facilities, our buildings, in a state of good repair. And once we figure out what that dollar figure is, then that dollar figure has to be invested every year into your existing network, because you can't get into a situation of deferred maintenance. When you do that, you end up saving this year, but you end up paying more as you go further out. So we're going to invest that much money into our, to maintain a state of good repair, into our network to maintain a state of good repair. Then whatever is left over from that is what we will use on our capital program for new projects. So that is the responsible way to run a state DOT. The governor buys into it. I've talked to many members of the legislature, and they are very excited by this prospect because it just makes good sense. It's good policy, it's good politics, it's good for the state, it's good for the taxpayers, and it makes sure that we are both living within our means but still maintaining a robust program. So that's what we're going to be doing over the next year. We have our bond bill hearing on Monday. So we'll be discussing more of the project-related stuff. Now, because we've had a bit of a, I guess you can't say a bit of a fundamental shift, because we've had a fundamental shift in the way that DelDOT does business, you know, because we didn't borrow and because we're going to be running a more lean operation now, we're not sitting on big piles of cash anymore. And what that means is we've got to do a much better job as an agency of scheduling our projects, because projects, you know, they go in phases, and you have to have the right-of-way bought before you can do the design, and then your design has to be in place and signed off if you need any permits before you can get your contractors to mobilize. But your contractor is probably working in a few different states, so he won't mobilize if he doesn't think you're ready to go. So these are big, complex projects for the most part, spread out over a multiple number of years. So what we are doing right now is trying to get our arms around what is going to go, what needs to phase out, what needs to shift out a year, and we hope to be able to share that with the legislature on Monday. But you know, the main thing that we've done is we've gone back and figured out that rather than saying, because every year what has gone on for the last 6 years or 7 years or maybe longer than that, is that DelDOT every year at the beginning of the year says we're going to do X, right? And that X is based on all the dollars that we have, all the dollars that we're going to bring in revenue, and then all the dollars that we can borrow based on that 50-50 pay-go. So that tells us that our universe of dollars to spend is X. And if you look for the last 7 years, what we actually spend, when you get through all the challenges like weather and contractors and all that sort of stuff, is Y. So rather than saying this year that we're going to spend X and borrowing to that level, we know that on average, DelDOT puts out about $180 million on the state side. That's our bandwidth. That is the capability of DelDOT to get projects out the door, right? So even if the legislature tomorrow said, you know, we think you guys are doing a heck of a job, we want to give you $1 billion more, chances are DelDOT would get out about $180 million, because it takes time to ramp up, it takes time to add staff, it takes time, you know, to get more out the door. So what we're saying is let's just be more realistic about it, and instead of shooting for the moon and actually coming up with X, we know that this is what we're going to do, and we know we can deliver this, so this is what we're going to deliver for next year. So that's kind of where we are. That's kind of the state of, I guess I can't say the state of the state. That is the state of DelDOT. But I can take some questions now, though.
I'm first.
All right. I guess the stand.
Okay, I'm going to lead him through, or go through step by step, something to answer something that, or to challenge something that you say. This is Vance Neck Road. That's
Yeah.
in front of my house.
Yeah.
Can you envision 7,000 trips a day on that road? Because your agency has already told me that's what's coming. On December the 3rd, and there's a member of council here tonight that will correct me if I say anything wrong, a development for a private concern on that road told county council at a land use meeting that they were going to spend $700,000 for road improvements on that road.
Okay.
To put 387 units on there. And at the time, I had asked several people in DelDOT how it was going to be financed and what the improvements were going to encompass. There was a member of DelDOT at the December 3rd meeting, and there was no discussion about any other financing other than the developer was going to provide $700,000. On December the 10th, there was a county council meeting about this same project. And on the way in the door, I got an email on my iPad from your agency that said, well, there's going to be 2 10-foot lanes, 2 5-foot shoulders, and a 10-foot multi-purpose lane. I'd already measured the road and knew that it wouldn't fit. So I stopped the member of council before they got the vote, and I says, this isn't going to work. So he delayed it for a month. On January the 3rd, Mr. Tucker went back to the land use meeting, along with the same member of DelDOT. And the local councilman was complaining that the land use notes didn't jive, and he didn't know how anything was going to be done about the trees, because the trees in front of my house have been there for 50 years. It's part of the community. It's not shown in that picture. Let me finish. And Mr. Culver, the land use manager, said very specifically, Newcastle County, that there would be no building permits issued on that road until all the road improvements were done.
Okay.
All right so far? Now we get to January the 10th. Going back to a meeting in the afternoon, get another message. Says that, oh no, the developer ain't going to pay for all that. The state is. Your agency telling me and my neighbors that we're going to have to pay for development improvements made necessary by a private developer.
Okay.
So, in any event, I tried to get this in through county council on the 24th when this was brought up. They voted to approve it. And the next day, this appears in the article. DelDOT's planning to cut debt.
Right.
What I don't understand is, why are the Delaware taxpayers being told that they have to shell out to improve a road that's been there for 50 years, didn't need any improvement, until the private developer comes in for his profit and putting many more cars on that road than I think is viable. And we got to pay for his what he's being made necessary.
Well, just to be clear, I think you're raising a land use issue. And
County council said would not have.
Which is fine, but I want to be very clear at the beginning. DelDOT's role is not land use.
Oh, yes, it is.
Ma'am, it is not. It is not my decision as to what goes on or what goes around. Please let me finish. What my role is as DelDOT is to say, if you want to make this, if you want to do X, So if you want to put a super Wawa somewhere, if you want to put in a more density, if you want to do whatever you want to do, then these are the improvements that you need to make. And then if the developer chooses to make those improvements, then we would issue a letter of no objection. But it is not my role to say that this road or the land use surrounded with that road is good, bad, or indifferent. I want to make that very clear, because as a Secretary of Transportation, look, I have feelings on smart growth and development and things of that nature. But that, you know, I can't emphasize this enough, that the role of a transportation agency is to be told what the improvements are that a developer or a county or whoever wants to make, and then if you want to do those things, then these are the improvements that you need to make.
That's fine, and I agree with you.
Okay, I just want, if you want to talk land use,
But
I don't have any answers for you on land use.
Every time the issue of transportation costs and capacity is brought up at a county council meeting, the fingers start to get pointed, and they're always pointed at DelDOT, right?
Most, you guys mostly do it to us, but. All right.
But finger pointed at DelDOT for what, though? Like,
DelDOT issued the letter of no objection.
right,
And
because
no one, and no one in my community knows how these improvements are going to be made, what the impact's going to be to the community, when they're going to be done, and then on top of that, your agency countermanded Mr. Culver by saying, oh no, we're not going to hold them back on the building permits. They can go ahead and start building. We're going to let them recoup some money from housing sales, then we'll make them do the improvements. So now it gets to the point where, who do you believe and when?
well, I can't speak to the specifics because I wasn't in the meetings that you were in, right? And so I just want, and we can look into it, right, in terms of what has transpired.
I will send emails to Nicole.
To Nicole, yeah, and Nicole came from Newcastle County and probably has a better sense of that. So
I think it begs the question: if DelDOT is going to put the $700,000 up front to make the improvements on the front end of this development,
The developer is. The developer's putting up 700, but the improvement in front of my house is going to be done on the public dime.
Right.
It's either going to be done through a DelDOT project, quote, or the local legislators are going to do it through their streets money.
okay.
I contacted both local legislators. They're not here tonight, and they're not answering the question after 30 days.
I guess it begs the question, if you talk to us, we're from all over Newcastle County, we've been involved in civic stuff all over the place. We could find you a dozen places where you could spend that amount of money to improve the standards of roads based on demand of today. And why would DelDOT put any money up before the developer put his money up first?
I can't comment to the specifics because I don't, I didn't. And I'm not trying to evade the question. I'm just saying that to me.
Well, let me give you one more example.
Yes, ma'am. I will look into it, and I will. We will get back to you on it. But
There was another development from Fieldsboro Road, and there's a couple of people who like Fieldsboro Road, to where there's going to be 100 and some low-income residences built down there. There was no transportation within 6 miles, no public transportation. So what Newcastle County did was they changed the note 42 for Robinson Farms from the developer should contact DelDOT to the developer shall contact DelDOT. Well, the last time I checked in all these newspaper articles, you don't have any money to go expand the bus service everywhere in the county, right?
that would be, that is a true fact.
So at least in my view, there is a substantial disconnect between what's really going to be done, when it's going to be done, who's going to pay for it, and how this whole plan is going to come together. There is no plan. Back on December the 3rd.
Hold on, but the fact that there's no plan, again, this to me sounds like a planning issue. And so I want to be very clear. If somebody, we don't approve low-income developments, high-income developments. What we do is we work with the county to say, if you want to do X, then this is what you need to do on the transportation side. And they can make that happen or they cannot make that happen. And once they make that happen, then we issue our letter of no objection.
You defer to the individual counties as to what they feel is an adequate improvement requirement for transportation. You review the individual counties' regulations and structures as far as road improvements for a development plan, and you say, yes, it meets requirements, or no, it doesn't meet requirements.
Right, based on based on the traffic generated by the development.
But it's based on standards that are defined by the individual counties and not ones that you've defined
Well,
for them.
we're actually working through that process right now on the whole TIS, TOA regulation issue, which has been simmering for a long time. And I will
It's
tell
in
you,
a hard boil right now.
right, well, it's a challenge though, because it's something that, you know, it's hard to regulate the entire state when Newcastle is very different than Kent, is very different than Sussex. So we're working through that process right now, and we have some more, when I got here, we were ready to go out with some regulations, and we decided to have public meetings.
Yes, right.
And based on the feedback that we got from those public meetings, we've decided that we're gonna go and take another crack at this. And we have draft regulations coming out when?
In March.
In March, so we'll have draft regulations
We
based,
set a public meeting.
and we will bring those out again to public meetings. And again, I will tell you that we're not going to make everybody happy, but what we are doing is a good faith public effort where we had one set, we asked for meetings across the state, we got feedback at all those meetings, and we have incorporated that feedback into the draft regulations that we're going to bring out in March. So it's an application.
Secretary Bhatt, Charlie Wayne. There's a more fundamental issue, and it's the lack of money and federal money coming into the state, which has been announced to be remarkably reduced, and federal borrowing, us borrowing more money. The issue is with the implosion of residential development into the counties, what substantiates it, and it should it be public money going into private roads and to feed residential growth in the state? Should not our priorities be focused clearly on interstate commerce and trade and accommodating that and requiring the local governments and or the developers and private users to pay substantially more of those private roads?
I will say this, that the 30% of the roads in Delaware are eligible for federal funds. We get about $210 million a year in federal funds. So those 30% of roads are what we consider to be the NHS, the National Highway System. So in Delaware, I think of 40, I think of 95, I think of 13, 1, what else am I thinking of? 202, you know, some of those. But once you get off of that primary network, you start to run out. So that's why we have, so you made a couple points there. On the federal dollars, there actually isn't, there's three, so Safety Lou, which was the federal spending bill, expired 3 years ago, it's up again. There's three potential, there's a bill in the House, there's a bill in the Senate, and then the administration also has a bill, but another option is just to extend Safety Lou. The House bill, which is the House Republican bill, is probably the most draconian, but it keeps the funding levels there. What the House bill basically does is takes transit funding and CMAQ funding and takes it out of the Highway Trust Fund and moves it over and makes it compete with other things, which is why I don't support it personally, but I don't vote in Congress. On the Senate side, they basically want to extend Safety Lou for 2 more years at the funding levels. Again, we'd get $200 million at that same level, and the administration's proposal is actually much more ambitious in terms of funding transportation. So on the federal side, those federal dollars are going to remain there. On the transportation side, on the state side, which is where the majority of our roads fall under, you can't use federal dollars on the majority of our roads. It's when we say it's taxpayer dollars, it is taxpayer dollars, but I want to be clear that 1/3 of it comes from tolls. The bulk of our tolls are paid for by out-of-state drivers, and that is, that's a pretty good benefit to have if you're a state like Delaware. It allows us to a lot of flexibility. 1/3 of it comes from like DMV fees, and then 1/3 comes from gas tax. Now, you're asking me a values question of should developers pay it, or should taxpayers pay. And I will tell you, if I go in front of a group of developers, they're going to say, look, we're dying right now. We're dying, and we need to, and again, I'm not saying, but all I'm saying though is that is their viewpoint. And so it is not my job to say that you need to do, that, I think what we need to have is a conversation. And I think it needs to involve, because again, Delaware is very different in that, as the Secretary of Transportation, when we're discussing billion-dollar road projects, it's very strange to me to go from, sorry, not billion-dollar programs. It's very strange for me to go from a high-level conversation about a billion-dollar program or the high cost of transit and all this other sort of stuff, and then dial all the way down to a traffic light in front of someone's development. That is a very strange construct. Delaware is only one of 3 states in the country where all these roads are owned by the network. And the entire network is owned by the state. So I will tell you, I haven't solved, I don't know if I've solved many problems. I have not been able to solve all the problems, but this is one that we can talk about.
It's in question. It's still in question.
I agree, absolutely.
Fritz, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Secretary, my name is Fritz Griesinger, and in the mid-70s, the federal government said, hey, you have to have more public input in what you're doing. And to respond to that, DelDOT said we're going to create the Citizen Participating Advisory Committee. And I was honored to be selected on that committee. What I learned was that there's a measurement called level of service. And it occurred to me that we were getting, even back in the 70s, a lot of problems with traffic congestion. And I thought, well, maybe if we tie development to level of service, that would help resolve the problem. And in fact, I was quite successful in getting that shepherded through county council. And that is in the code today, that level of service is one of the criteria for determining what kind of development is going to occur and where it will be acceptable based on that level of service. The problem that we're running into these days, though, is that sometimes county council decides they don't want to deal with a level of service. So they go to DelDOT and they say, DelDOT, look, let's do this. Why don't you guys go ahead and get a waiver on level of service? And it's a cozy little arrangement when it works that way. Because then you have an interface that people can point at each other. Nobody has responsibility. Would you want to comment on that if you feel comfortable? Thank you. And again, that's right. I think she's a little more attractive than I am.
She's a great gal, don't kid yourself.
She is. I will tell you. I think Carol Ann Wicks is just a really classy lady, and I actually had dinner with her. I want to say about 4 or 5 months ago. We were only supposed to spend about 30 minutes together. We spent an hour and a half together, and she is a great lady. I think she did some great work here. She was very naturally well respected, and she has now gone back to work with RK&K, and she looks great. She looks like she is stress-free and happy again, and I'm very happy for her.
Beware, she was a scapegoat.
I mean, I can't comment. On your question on level of service,
Yes.
To me, level of service is a pretty, it's somewhat, so for example, level of service F, right? Yeah. We say this has a level of service of F. That means it's failing. But
stalled parking lot.
Right. Well, actually, no. Level of service F is actually not a stalled parking lot. It's actually where it's breaking down. It's actually level of service F is rated not at a stalled parking lot. Now a stalled parking lot would be considered level of service F. So what's interesting is that if something's already at level of service F and you're going to degrade it further, how do you quantify that? Right. So I actually don't feel that level of service is the best way. You mentioned something though that you talked about. Did you mention density? You talked about. Did you mention density?
No, but I can.
Are you talking about traffic back in the 70s?
Yes.
I will tell you that one of the biggest challenges I think that we face in Delaware, and again, this is my experience coming in here from and having lived in the state now for 9 months, is that you have to get in a car to go pretty much anywhere.
Exactly.
And the state is very sprawled. It's sprawled out. And, you know, which, look, we can't fix that overnight. When I was at the Federal Highway Administration before I came here, there was a partnership between US DOT, EPA, and HUD, which is called the Partnership for Sustainable Communities. And we were trying to promote this concept of livable communities and transportation options. The governor is a big supporter of that, trying to provide alternatives on biking. We've talked about transit. Transit is actually, I will tell you that, you know, I'm still dialed into a lot of my friends in Washington, and I've been talking about this for a little while. It's become more part of the general conversation right now, but the president just sent a special envoy over to Israel to convince them that now is not the time to attack Iran, or to try to get them to back down a little bit, because the situation is just escalating. Iran cut off oil shipments to France and Great Britain today. Gas oil prices were $105 a barrel, and if there is an attack, and
No
the Iranians...
disrespect to you, Mr. Secretary, but I don't think you're answering my question, and I'm not going to pursue it further at this point.
Okay, well, I'm actually not answering your question. I'm actually making another point right now,
I
which is that
understand.
if oil prices go to $150 or $200 a barrel because there's conflict in the Middle East, then gas is going to go to $5 and $6 a gallon. And then all of these places in Delaware that are hard to get to by car are going to not only be hard to get to by car, but people are going to have to make an economic choice. If I have to get to my job and I have to pay $75 for a tank of gas, that's actually going to have a real impact. So we need to be thinking about all of these things, including level of service and including options as we go forward.
Smaller cars and narrower lanes.
Charlie.
Excuse me.
Pay attention. That's a nice segue into something I was working on last year, which was going to observe our housing authority present to the legislature and the DART Transportation Center guy who's now gone.
Stephen Kingsbury?
Yeah.
He's at the Port Authority in New York.
Right. But my point was to try and engage the agency heads and ask them where they stood on that same sort of partnership, because last year we just decided to make big investments in our disability community to house them. But is there, I asked HUD, or version of HUD, is there an incentive to require that building these new buildings for disabled are on mass transit? And I know that I observed that some of the Transportation Trust Task Force talked about how much we spend on paratransit. Everybody's aware of that. But once again, so it's a real question to have agencies try and tackle this without the county's input and without a real partnership with the counties, because if we are allowing high density out in rural Townsend or rural Lower Delaware, it's not just the workforce housing, higher density, out 5 miles away from a bus, and a tiny road that's going to have school buses and all kinds of extra stuff on it. But it's also the old 55 and over communities that are now spread out. That's the kind of thing that's going to require all sorts of paratransit assistance. And if they're out in the middle of nowhere, and then we just with their sprawl is one thing, but we have had significant efforts in the last 5 years to talk about moving away from sprawl. So we have village and hamlets, we have other growth models that supposedly are counter sprawl. But in reality, what we're seeing is just continuation of that, because the density allowances for, let's say, our village hamlet, the Whitehall, that middle central core, are very low. They're not up to 28 DU. They're not something that'll support mass transit. So I think we feel like we're in a vicious circle. And so one thing, if you could do some work with making that kind of partnership, but even though you don't have authority with the county, the legislature does have the potential to rein back some of the county's authority. They gave the counties those authorities. We can rein them back, because if we don't get cooperation with how we allow our planning to go forward, no, we're not going to pay for anything. It's just going to be a disaster. So I'm glad that you have that understanding of that partnership, and if we can do more with that, we are certainly willing to try and help get legislatures in the room and people like Tim Sheldon here, council people in the room, because everybody wants to find a solution, but right now we're not going anywhere.
And we actually, I can't remember their names. There were two ladies that came to see me, and they were from the Governor's Council on I don't know if, what was that?
Extraordinary persons. The council on extraordinary person, or persons?
I actually thought it was on aging populations or something like that, but basically, what they're trying to do is put together a partnership, just like you described, where, you know, the housing authorities and the, on the healthcare side, and just working together and putting together these task forces so that we're actually making those targeted investments. I agree with you that we need to be making sure that the dwellings are going, that need those services, are going in a more compact fashion, otherwise we're going to price ourselves out of being able to pay for it.
Sure.
I'm Vic Singer. So far the discussion has been in terms of millions of dollars. The question I'm going to ask, I want to assume that you have the authority on your sole signature to spend $10 on petty cash or $100 on petty cash.
I don't know. I don't spend petty cash, so I'm sure I could. But I do all my stuff is on SuperCard.
Based on that,
I worry about petty cash, so.
based on that assumption, I'd like to explore something with you.
Sure.
Some months ago, the Nemours Foundation approached DelDOT and you for relief from a deed restriction.
Yes.
Based on that deed restriction to preserve an elderly house, they bought a parcel of land for $10.
Well, that wasn't a few months ago. That was a long time ago. Now, a few months ago, I relieved them from the restrictions.
That's right.
But that purchase was
My
made about
question-
5 or 6 years ago.
The purchase was years back.
Yes.
Did you get the
But
land back?
the release from the deed restriction
Was signed by me.
was yours.
Yes.
I would like for you to explore the reasoning that you went through to decide not to give them back their $10 and take title to the land.
Sure. So Murphy House, I think, was one of like the first 10 things that hit me when I first got here. And I will say that it was a pretty not good situation all around. I think within about a month of getting here, Federal Highways convened a meeting in which it was DelDOT and all of our historic preservation people. The SHPO was there, Preservation Delaware was there, DENREC was there. There were 2 or 3 other preservation groups in Delaware. And Nemours came and made a, talked about what they had originally planned to do with the house. And I had conversations with Grace Gary, and we went around the room, and we had a long discussion in which they talked about how they wanted to turn it into office space. Then they got in, it was going to cost more money, all this other sort of, I'm not here to judge what they did years ago. However, what I got them to agree to was to say, okay, that entire parcel, was worth, and I don't remember the exact figures, but the house was obviously not in great condition when it was, when Nemours purchased it. The piece of property was landlocked, so there's no driveway, you can't get to it, you can't park in front of it. So in terms of commercial, you couldn't put a wall on it, right? So in terms of what the piece of land, the value was not very high when they purchased it. And so what I said was, okay, you were supposed to do X, Y, and Z to stabilize and maintain this house. And again, this is all going back to 2004 or 2005, long before I got here. And I said, okay, you didn't do that stuff. So what I want you to do is you need to put up $50,000, which is about the amount of what it was, what the land was probably worth at the time that it went over. And again, we're talking about that corner of land that's landlocked, that has no access. And I said, you put up $50,000, and we will give you, and this was in July, late July, early August. And I said, you take 90 days and you do a good faith effort, a true good faith effort, not just sort of, like pay some lip service, but you advertise and you get out there and you find somebody that will move this house and move it to a parcel, move it on somewhere else, move it to another place, Denrick. And I will tell you, we went around the room at that meeting, and nobody wanted the Murphy House. Nobody had the money.
Except for Delaware Greenways wanted it.
Delaware, okay, so now let me say, Delaware Greenways and Mark Chura and I had a long conversation about this. They came up with an idea. They came up with an idea which was to say, okay, let's turn this into a like a bike. There was either a bike share idea or a like a workshop kind of thing. There were some ideas on a coffee shop, and I will tell you, we went around and we looked at it, and the dollar figure for that was around $400,000 to $500,000, and nobody had the money. And I will tell you, you talk about our finances, I did not, people say, well, why don't you just take it back? Well, I can't just take it back, like something has to be done with it. Like it was, you know, it was so I'll tell you that it was a tough decision, but not every decision when you are a Secretary of Transportation is easy. And if I had come here 5 or 6 years ago, we probably would have done things differently. But with the condition of the house that it was in, the fact that even amongst the preservation community, other than the Delaware Greenways, which wasn't a funded idea, they had an idea and a concept, but no actual money behind it, there was no other option on the Murphy House. So I don't like what happened, but I didn't have another choice.
Mr. Secretary, the question I asked was, why didn't you give them back their $10 and take title to the parcel? You didn't answer it.
What you asked was, you asked me to explore what the setup was.
Well, how you decided not to give them back their $10 and take title to the parcel.
But and do what with it though?
Leave it as open space.
But it is going to be open space, and as
Oh,
part
I
of the deal.
appreciate that, but it's not public.
Well, but the footprint of the house remains. They're leaving the foundation. They're going to put up a historic plaque commemorating the Murphy House.
But it
I mean,
doesn't belong
we're
to
talking
the
about.
public. For $10 out of petty cash, the public could have owned it.
But I don't see the value to doing it. Like,
But that wasn't the question. I asked.
Okay, then
the
my question is- then my answer is no.
How you decided not to spend $10 and buy back the parcel.
because then I would have had to pay $20,000 to demolish the house. So it's not. It wasn't. You're trying to make a point, and I get your point, but it's not as simple as what you're saying. I couldn't just.
I didn't suggest that it was simple. All that I suggested is I see merit in the public owning the parcel.
Okay.
I would have been happy to give you $100 to give you 900% to buy the parcel.
I just want to follow up on the Murphy House.
Yes.
About a few weeks ago, I actually spent time in the land use department looking at that file. And DelDOT put a new roof on and fixed the porch when they handed it over. They had actually sunk a lot of public money into the property. The idea was never to rehabilitate the house. It was to be a land use feature. It was because of the Morris Historic District. So when they came back out at these high price, Christine Quinn of Land Use did a really good assessment. She worked with some DelDOT people, and I would suggest to other people, go look at the file, because there's a lot of information in there. There's a lot of misconceptions and distortions about how much money would it be to rehab, et cetera, et cetera. So it's an unfortunate thing, and it really is worth a look in that file to see the real truth. But I don't think it's being sped out here today, but I'll be done with it.
David? Secretary Bhatt, I'm really pleased to hear that it's going to move with transparency, but I'm a hard sell.
Okay.
I'm not convinced that it's much more than being superficial and window dressing. I'm going to give you a copy here of what we go through when we ask for information.
All right.
Maybe you can change this culture. This was related to Route 301.
All
I
right.
went to a public hearing. Your staff talked about budget numbers out of a draft report. I asked for a copy of that because I wanted to understand the assumptions that went in to drive the model to do it. I get the runaround. It takes months because it's draft, you won't share it. I say, well, shouldn't it make sense for the public to have an opportunity to look at that and the assumptions, because I don't particularly believe some of the housing projections that you're using to drive it are accurate. I run a lot of models, I would like to. What we get is that the end product, even those who understand modeling and the other stuff, is maybe an to tweak your final decision. The original report that you spent, I did for you and got $487,523 on to say it wasn't good enough, so you cut another contract for $97,744. According to the FOIA, for a $500,000 project, there are no written comments back to that contractor that they could provide me. A $500,000 contract? And whatever they did deliver from the contractors was draft, so until they rewrote it, we couldn't see it anywhere. And it seems to me if we're going to be transparent, we should be willing to share that.
I'm not sure which report you're referencing.
It's the...
Like which one of the...
It was for the Stantec work for Route 301, for the toll revenue reports.
Okay.
Because my questions are, where are we? We've been trying for years to understand, is it or isn't it going to be revenue neutral? The numbers, and I know it's finally, but this is what we're going through. There's a cultural issue, there's an ethics issue. And this is not the only thing. You talked about RK&K and engineering. I sat in the meetings, I worked for the state as well, in the riverfront, and granted it was under Nathan Hayworth, where I watched contractors for RK&K come in who were doing planning with Wallace Roberts and Todd, throwing bills out, and cash, city commissioner, I would look at them and say, well, who authorized this? Well, what had DelDOT pay? This was happening right and left. And, you know, so I really want to dig in a little more about how transparent, is it just posting things on the internet, or when people have these type of specific questions and about the assumptions, even if they're draft report, will there be a willingness to open it? That's the first question. The second question is, that I want you to respond to is, what can we do to improve the ethics? In the state of Delaware, there's one ethics person, Janet Wright. There was no requirements for ethics training. And I don't just blame DelDOT, it's a state government issue. And I want to know what we can do to have, like the federal government has, required ethics, at least in accordance with the Hatch Act. When are we going to get that in the state of Delaware? Because many of the problems that you're trying to clean up, I think, come down to raw ethical failings. Delaware's a small state. If you haven't realized it already, there's a strong political elite. It's an insider's game. And if you don't do what they like, they put a lot of pressure on. And that affects your employees as well. And ethics is the only thing that drives us through it, and we're not doing it.
So your first question was, can you see the Stantec toll projection report? Any draft report is not FOIA. Any final report you can absolutely see, subject to it not being pending litigation or anything like that. Now, I will tell you that we get a lot of requests for information, and we do not have a lot of, now, I will say, let me say two things here. One, let me just...
I understand a draft report. If it's a draft report and you're hiding or you're not ready to share it, then don't come to Middletown Fire Hall and have your staff presenting it on a goddamn billboard when I can't get the supporting document.
Okay, so let me just finish what I was going to say. I would say that I think that historically, and again, I can't comment about, because I wasn't here for some of this stuff, that DelDOT has become very defensive about things, right? So, and I think that's partly, and that's not just a DelDOT thing, that is true of transportation agencies across the country. You're trying to build a project and you get attacked. And so when you get attacked, your natural tendency is to, to circle the wagons. Now, if you want to talk about 301, and on the ethics side, I agree with you completely. I don't know how to implement stricter ethics reform. I will tell you, I have a very strict rule with myself. Sometimes people ask me to take me out to dinner, and I have a very strict policy, or to lunch, not dinner, to lunch, and I have a very strict policy that I always pay for myself. That comes from the fact that I spent 2.5 years in the Obama administration, and we have very strict ethic rules there that you couldn't accept anything over $20 or $25. And to me, it's not worth $20 or a lunch at Let Pigs Fly or whatever it is down there to just have somebody be able to say that. I will say that I drive a 2002 Honda Civic, and if I trade that in and I get a, I don't know, like a nice Mercedes or something, then you will know that something is wrong with my ethics. Until that happens, though, I'm happy. We do a disclosure, though. I have to do a disclosure as to what that doesn't mean anybody who doesn't drive a 2002 Honda Civic is on the take. I'm just saying that I am not. Your other question on 301. Yeah. Your other question about 301. 301 is a road that I am not a big fan of building expressways, new expressways in green spaces. However, However, 301 is a road that DelDOT has been reduced to talking about, well, we should build it because it pays for itself. That is not why you build a road. You build a road because you're
gaining my confidence already.
But I don't think, but I will tell you that I think that you build the road because you need a road, right? Now, having lived in Middletown for a month, that's not a long time, but having fought my way across 299 and on 896 to get across, and seeing the level of trucks that are on that in that area, something has to be done to relieve that congestion. Now, so there's two options then, right? We know we cannot have a no-build scenario. And again, I'm just talking where we are right now. We can't have a no-build scenario. So then the question becomes, do you build something off alignment, like in that green space that is laid out there, or do you go in and you try to widen existing 301?
Yes.
Which we would then have a completely different set of people in here going, you want a 6-lane mega highway in my front yard? Forget about it. So the question then becomes, okay, if you're going to build the road because you know you need to build the road, then you don't build it because it pays for itself. You build it because you need the road. Then the question becomes, how do you build the road? Now, I mentioned earlier that it's actually a good time to borrow money right now. And the latest traffic counts that we got from the latest traffic study that are part of that study show that traffic counts have come down.
That's what I want to know. I have asked for the original first report that even you are referring to so that I can see what changed about it and how those numbers are being played with, and I have been denied that report.
Well, we're going to get that for you. I will get that for you.
Keep getting denied that. I can understand the assumptions, I can understand what you put into a model.
But I'm going to get it for you.
Will not share that with you.
I'm going to get it for you.
Okay.
We'll get that for you. But I will tell you, I'm going to take you through the analysis. The passenger traffic is down. The trucks are static. So, like, stable, the same. And so what that has done is that has dropped the revenue projections over the 40 years of the bond. And, but at the same time, the costs have come down about $60 million for the project. Because, that's just what's happening with projects right now. So the net of that is that you could build it, and what I'm being told right now is we could miss the revenue projections by 30 or 40%, and the road still breaks even. So what I have decided on 301 is that we are going to, I've asked, because here's my concern. My concern is coming from the federal level. There are a lot of toll roads across the country that have run into trouble because you have to open on time and you have to get your traffic. If you don't do those two things, and 3, you have to raise your tolls based on the schedule that you're supposed to raise them. And that's always a tough thing. So 1, we have to make sure that the project opens on time. Now, I'm pretty confident that the topography that we're building through, we know it's not like it's unknown sediments or what's under there. We're pretty confident on that. But you have to open on time and you have to hit your traffic projections. The other thing that we have to be careful of, I actually think that you need to build 301 from a regional perspective, just because where we sit on the northeast corridor, there's a lot of traffic on 95. There's no redundancy for those trucks. But if you're going to say that 301 is going to pay for itself, it cannot be at the expense of traffic off of 95. Because if you're paying down on 301 at the Delaware-Maryland border, you're not paying up on 95. If it's the same traffic, if all you're doing is diverting off. So there has to be actual traffic there. So what I've asked our contractor to do, and I've also asked Federal Highways to do, is to look at the analysis that has been done. And on the Federal Highway side is where I come from, Federal Highways, is look at this analysis and tell me, does this make sense? Because we have data guys up there who can look at it. And 2, I want our traffic contractor to drill down and tell me where is that traffic coming from. Because if they're going to say it's local traffic, well, local traffic is just going to divert around the toll, right? Just like the people who pay toll on 95, very few of them are actual people in Delaware, right? They just go around it, right? So if they're going to tell me that it's local traffic that is the bulk, it's Eastern Maryland people that are going to move there, well, they're probably not going to pay a toll at the Delaware-Maryland border, which throws off your revenue projections at 40 years. And my thing is that if we're going to build a road because we need the road, then we do it the right way, and we do it based on the right numbers, and we don't get into a situation where we start to put the finances at risk just because we want to get the road built quickly. So we'll do it methodically.
And that was one of the issues that I pressed Mark Tudor and the rest of the staff, and nobody would answer, and that was, what are the assumptions for local traffic? And they told me basically, well, we're going out and talking to the local governments and they're telling us what their projected growth is. Well, we repeatedly get it wrong. We know we have more houses projected.
Yeah, I don't know what Mark told you there. Really what this is based on is a traffic modeling agency who comes in, they do counts, and they do the projections. So it's not Del Dot talking to local agencies, it's actually, we're paying for it.
This is how Stan Tech was approaching it. They were
Okay.
getting advice
Right.
from Kenny Branner and Newcastle County, who have been in a fight over who's going to get transfer taxes for the last 15 years, and they always overinflate the numbers.
Right.
But historically
That was the biggest
speaking,
number I could
there was an agency engineer, this is prior to Route 1 being completed, told me at a Southern Alliance meeting that when Route 1 opened, Route 13 would be like a ghost town, complete with dust balls rolling down. Well, that never happened because the locals avoid the tolls, as you indicated, at any cost. Route 13 is still wall-to-wall traffic. So
I don't think that, because I don't think that one is, I think that if you look at the traffic, like I drive, I drive up here, we come to Wilmington, we will take, because the toll is $1, right? So it just becomes the elasticity.
Except on weekends.
Except on weekends where we get those good out-of-staters again. That's right. We get those good out-of-state dollars every chance we get. And look, I grumble about it, but I'm not going to get off and take that big loop around and get on and go down 13 and hit all those lights. Some people might make that. Now, if it's a $4 toll though, at the border, then people might make a different
We don't
decision.
pay the toll.
Don't pay the toll.
Everybody in the legacy doesn't pay the toll.
No, I'm saying if
Just
you're
about.
coming from Dover up to Wilmington, and you need I think that I look at the traffic that's on there. It's not just Maryland and Pennsylvania traffic. There's a lot of Delaware traffic on Route 1, and I think there's a lot of because it's $1, and some people, for most people, that is not that big of a consideration. Now, I will tell you personally, if we put a $5 toll in Dover, then I would drive my butt up to Smyrna and get on there where it was 50 cents, right? And I think that most people would make a rational decision on what they wanted to do there. So.
Okay, one more question because we've got some.
Back here, back of the room, sir.
Secretary Bhatt, myself, Chuck, Senator Ennis met with you back in August of last year, and you were putting your A-team trying to get answers for us on Southern Newcastle County road structure. Very hard to get answers from Del Dot that you can read and understand. We FOIA, I don't know, a lot. The trouble is, we get a book back, and we ask for chapter and verse, and you're giving us pages and pages and pages. Nothing really concrete that gives answers. I'm going to give you an example. The book, ASTRO book, which you all say is the rule, tells about the tables of how wide a road is supposed to be, and the lanes and shoulders and blah, blah, blah. Well, it says one thing, but Del Dot says we have flexibility to change it.
Sure, you have context-sensitive solutions.
Yeah, but the trouble I'm having is, how do you change the code and still be within the code? If the code says...
The code is, I mean, all of that engineering, those are not like national design requirements. That's guidance. That is guidance. So some states interpret, some states interpret it differently, and that's why you have different road characteristics across the country. But also, just to address what you just said, we had one complaint about FOIA where you can't get enough, and then another FOIA complaint that we're giving too much. Let me just say this about FOIA. We'll do a better job of FOIA, but when a request comes in and staff has to go and respond to that FOIA request, it can get to be quite a bit. And if we do a better job of being transparent, I understand, but all I'm saying is...
It wasn't a FOIA request. It was an ask for clarifying information that your staff decided to kick into a FOIA for reasons that are a little bit unclear to me.
Okay.
Well, my question is, when you get into this situation, and you're telling me you're allowed to change whatever ASHTO says. However, I'm reading the Del Dot manual, and it says, this amount of traffic equals this amount of roadway. But you don't do it. Who are we supposed to believe? DelDOT, the engineer that talks to us, or at ASHTO? You can't get straight answers from DelDOT. The DelDOT book that I'm referencing was done in 2003, and it lists the table of what size a road's supposed to be. I don't have much faith in what the engineers tell me from DelDOT. They seem to want to tell you what they want you to believe more than what the rule is. And how do you get past that?
You know, well, I mean, part of it is culture change at DelDOT. I mean, I think that DelDOT has been a very engineering-focused agency for a long time, and engineers tend to go by their books and their standards, and they tend to believe pretty strongly in what they're saying. And I think that there's a reason that engineers and planners, I come from a planning background, I used to run an NPO, planners are communicators, and engineers will say, well, once you guys are done talking, then we'll go out and build it. And if you find an engineer who can actually communicate really well, they're the ones who make a lot of money because they can not only design something that's really great, but they can communicate about it. And I will say that at DelDOT, we have some engineers who are very good on the design side and on the implementation side. They're probably not as good on the communication side. And part of that is just a culture change of making the agency more accountable to the public. And we're going to try and do that. I can't do it in 8 months. I am trying, by coming here, I feel like we're making steps. I'm not just coming here to blow smoke. I'm telling you, we'll get you some things, we'll work on some answers, we'll find some things. I'm not going to be able to say yes to everything that we hear. I'm not going to be able to stop all of the development that you don't like, because frankly, some of these things are land use issues that are not DelDOT's responsibility. But my commitment is we're going to listen and we're going to work with you.
One more thing. Can I defer the rest of my question to Al?
How you
Al's
doing?
an engineer.
Hi, my name's Ellis McKitka. We've communicated before via letters, and latest one was February 1st, 2012 on Phillsborough Road. Okay, Phillsborough Road is deficient. It doesn't meet code. And in 2003, for a local road, the DelDOT code spells out in black and white. For a local road, over 4,000 average daily trips, it should be 6-foot shoulders and 11-foot lane widths. You took over the road in 2005. You said it was great. We still have a deficient curve. It does not meet the 34-foot requirement required prior to issuing building permits.
I know that you all came in and met with us. I asked Natalie to take a look at the Phillsborough Road stuff. I saw the letter that came in February, I want to say 5th or 6th. It's been a little bit of a busy month with JFC and Bond Bill and the News Journal. But my commitment is when I saw your letter come back in, I made a mental note to myself, or not a mental note, but I made a note to check to find out what they came back with. I can't run down every single one of these.
And here's the bottom line. The bottom line is your goal is the same as my goal. As a professional engineer, you're also a professional person. Your goal running the highway department is to make the highways and roads in Delaware per state and federal standards, to make them safe.
Absolutely.
And if they're not per state and federal standards and codes, they're not safe, and you're putting people in harm's way. And that's a given. And to say that you don't have to live by the code, that's like saying you're a criminal. I don't have to play by the rules, I'm a criminal. That is nonsense. Your professional engineers are supposed to do things by code. And the professional engineers, in many cases, their hands are tied by what they have to work with. And they're trying to make best fit. Good example, if they don't have enough right-of-way, like Phillsborough Road, you only have 40 feet, they can't make it properly unless they take more right-of-way. And it's not happening. And each day things are postponed, you're putting more people at risk. And we have a senior citizen community here, and there's 5 of us senior citizens here trying to get things done. We want to be on top of the fixer-upper list. And I think there's a lot of stuff here that needs fixed quickly, or you're putting people in harm's way. And frankly, roads accidents normally occur due to driver error. We have on Fieldsboro Road, not driver error, but a substantial amount of road error. Bad curve, short thing. You can't even pull off the road to fix your tire. Shoulders are 4 feet, and in many cases not even that. And if you try to pull off more than 4 feet, you're either going to be in a ditch or you're going to hit a utility pole. So I really think the federal you should put a fund in place to fix what's broke as quick as possible.
And to Al's point, in October of 2011, I think it was, County Land Use approved another project on Fieldsboro Road. And in May of 2011, they approved even more on Fieldsboro Road. So while their complaints are going back burner, we'll say, the county is moving forward at breakneck speed. So the dilemma we have is ongoing. Here's the closing comment.
Secretary Bhatt, I don't want you to get the wrong impression that the people that are sitting in this room and the ones that have been involved in Civic, like some of them as much as 50 years. As far as I know, none of us are opposed to land development. Things move on, times change, growth occurs, land development is a part of it, and today, as much as ever, the jobs that come out of development planning and then actual construction are huge, and they're a big part of the state economy, and they're necessary. Having said that, you've accepted a position in a state where the state has total responsibility for all road systems, even the most menial of roads, and kind of is a step out of your previous realm of responsibility. I empathize with your desire to see things move more in the direction of public transit, and I think that's a great concept, and I think it's something that we really need to pursue. But I see the viability across, say, Newcastle County to large-scale mass transit to be 15, 20, 25 years down the road. So in the meantime, you're stuck with the responsibility of bringing roads up to the standards that will meet the demands that are put upon them. In Newcastle County, with development coming through in the 60s, where we were moving out of the city of Wilmington and out of Newark, and things were expanding into the burbs. At that time, the county government and state government both put the developer in a position where they had primary responsibility for expanding road systems, sewer networks, interceptor lines, all the things that go into a major development plan before they stuck a shovel